Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Get ourselves some snacks.
I told you we'd be back. I love those little Babu Fricks. So, Mandalorian and Grogu. A terrible name for a movie. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Terrible name.
I can't deny that.
This is a terrible name.
I do think that feels like a very crass marketing move of just we're just going to name it the things that might get people to come.
But also might put people off.
Well, that too.
You know, it's just...
They should have called it The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda.
Yeah, no, they should call it the Baby Yoda movie. That's that. If you're just lean into it, just lean into what people want. I mean, okay, well, I guess before we unpack it too much, maybe we should say why would we be discussing this on our show right now, Nate? Maybe we should tease a little something.
So, next year is going to be the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, which happens to also be the second most parodied movie on The Simpsons in the first 13 seasons. So for that reason, we are planning to cover it on this podcast. I believe we're going to have a very special guest joining us to talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, it's George Lucas, everybody. We got George Lucas to agree to come on the show. He's a big Simpsons fan.
Yeah, huge Simpsons fan, for sure.
Yeah, turns out.
Yeah. So for that reason, we have a brand new Star Wars movie coming out this year. Have another brand new Star Wars movie coming out next year. So we do.
What's coming out next year?
Oh my gosh, Starfighter, starring Ryan Gosling.
Oh right, I did hear about this. This just shows how untapped into the greater Star Wars universe I am.
Yes, you and I are very different in that sense. I am
definitely
quite tapped in. My wife recently told me, she's like, I didn't really know you were a Star Wars guy, but you're kind of secretly a Star Wars guy. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess I am. I'm not someone who would consider themselves like a massive Star Wars fan, but I watch all of the Star Wars media. I've rewatched the movies countless times. I can tell you a lot about the sort of behind the scenes lore of various things, but there's always a bigger fan out there that would be like, oh, he's not a real fan. So I tend not to.
We're both of a generation where, because we were 10-year-old boys when the first prequel came out and all the special editions and stuff, I think we were just we got to kind of experience Star Wars mania, at least a form of Star Wars mania, at the peak perfect age, and therefore it's just it's kind of ingrained in us naturally. And
I have a brother that's 6 years older than me,
right?
So he was at the perfect age when all the original movies were being re-released in the 90s,
right?
And what I remember is in the 90s, we owned a bunch of Star Wars action figures that we had a collection of them that came in a giant Darth Vader head.
Oh, that's cool. That's super cool.
Yeah, they were all covered in crayon.
Of course.
But we had all this cool stuff. And when I was rewatching the original trilogy recently with my wife, and every once in a while some random side character would come on screen, and I was like, I had him as an action figure. And it would be like the guy with the tentacles on his head from Jabba's palace.
Going, of course.
So I've always loved that. All of the sort of nooks and crannies of Star Wars, I guess, for that reason.
Well, not only that, so we're recording this May 27th. May 25th is what I consider to be Star Wars Day, not this May the 4th nonsense, because it's May 25th is actually the anniversary of the release of Star Wars. So I sat down to watch the 4K 77, if you know, you know, fan scan of the original version of Star Wars, and I will only refer to it as Star Wars. It is not Star Wars A New Hope. Sorry, George. Screw you. It's called Star Wars. So I sat down to watch it, and so maybe it's a little bit unfair because I watched Star Wars, arguably the best Star Wars, the night before I went to go see Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, it was super fresh in my mind watching this new movie, which probably didn't do this new movie any service. It was probably doing it a serious disservice. But I don't know, man. Like I didn't. It's funny. I wouldn't go so far as to say I didn't like the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I think I was entertained, but I also think it's a pretty, to call it a movie is a bit of a stretch. Like, it really is just an episode of a TV show. Like, it didn't feel particularly, the storytelling didn't feel particularly grand and cinematic. The look didn't look that much different. I mean, and part of that has to do with the fact that the show looks very good. Like, TV has kind of elevated to the point where the difference between TV and movies is a lot more limited. But it just was like, I don't know. I just kind of felt like I was in a theater watching an extended episode of this TV show that I stopped watching after the first season because I kind of lost interest. So, I feel like you had a different vibe coming out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, maybe the important context for me coming into this movie is I like I said, I just rewatched a bunch of Star Wars stuff. So I rewatched the original trilogy. I watched the prequel trilogy, I watched the original trilogy. I watched the sequel trilogy, which I think is the first time I've rewatched it since they came out, basically. And then I'm in the middle of rewatching Andor.
Right. And
I think, maybe the difference between like your experience and my experience is like that gives you a really wild cross section of like what Star Wars can be.
Totally.
Right? Of like the originals, which have their vibe, the sequel trilogy, which has some real ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
Like some great stuff in it, some absolute garbage.
Some
divisive, controversial stuff in the middle, like
some very corporate synergy vibes to that whole sequel trilogy. Like a trilogy made by committee, I would say.
Yes. I like to think of it as an exquisite corpse, right?
Yes, very much so.
But yeah, so it's like, that, and then Andor is like something completely different from both of those things, which, I think is fantastic. But I guess because of that, maybe, I came into this movie, and I also have not rewatched any Mandalorian stuff.
Yeah.
I was not a huge fan of The Mandalorian, even the first season, which I think a lot of people really vibed with. I liked the first maybe half of the first season, and hated the finale of the first season, which felt just like a grown man playing with action figures, right? Of just like all these toys being smashed together of like, wouldn't it be cool if all these things fought each other? Which this movie definitely has a lot of that as well. But I will say, I think this movie, for the first like maybe half hour, I was really vibing with it. Okay. And I think the vibing is the right word because it is just a vibe, right? Like, yeah. There's very little talking.
There's very little meat to chew on that bone.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that. I would say there's very little talking. It's not a plotty movie. It's not a dialogue-heavy movie.
No.
I don't necessarily mind that part of it. And I actually think this movie's at its best when it's not talking.
yeah, because the dialogue is very terrible. Yeah.
As soon as Rada the Hutt starts talking, I'm just like, guys,
I'm not like my dad.
Like, less is more.
I'm not like my dad.
There's literally a point in this movie where Rada the Hutt gives a speech about his dad, who's Jabba the Hutt, and how he's not his dad, and so on. And then the Mandalorian like goes away, does some stuff, comes back, and then he gives him the same speech. And it's like, guys, in a movie where there's very little dialogue, like, why are you giving it to the giant slug?
Well, it's like it's funny because and I know you haven't seen it, but I reviewed it and then went and saw it again with my wife because she really wanted to see it. The Michael movie, where one of my biggest complaints about it is that Michael Jackson's arc in the movie is I gotta go out on my own, and he says that like 17 times in this movie.
Yeah.
It's like the main arc is like, I gotta do my own thing. I gotta go out on my own, and then like 5 minutes later, Bill, I gotta go out on my own. I gotta do my own thing, and we're like, we know, Michael. Like we know, you told us that. You've told us that several times. Are you gonna do it? And like, right of the Hut, same thing. I'm not my dad. I'm not my. Yeah, no, I know. You've said it 17 times. It seems to be the only line of dialogue Jeremy Allen White recorded was, "I'm not like my dad."
But I think the thing is that it's like, if like legitimately, if this movie just cut those scenes down to like one line of dialogue that's only delivered once and not repeated, the movie would be way better off for it, right? And I think it actually would have, because they're trying to connect the dots with all the themes, right? Like this movie is a movie about fatherhood and about, you know, like children going off and doing their own thing and the parents trying to accept that, and like that's really the sort of emotional heart of this movie, and those scenes just hit it way too hard, right? But you don't really need it. It's like him saying that line one time is plenty, and he doesn't need to explain it again and again and again, right? And then there's all the stuff with like him and Grogu where they're sort of bonding, and then he comes to appreciate the Mandalorian for how he like fathers the little guy, right? So like that stuff comes through fine for me. But again, like it's at its best when they're not talking about it, they're just showing it on screen, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I like all the stuff of the Mandalorian going from planet to planet and walking around cool environments and like walking into a bar and being like, you know, hey, I'm here to talk about this, and then being like,
all the
"We're not gonna
Western
tell you about
tropes,
this."
basically,
and then him kicking a bunch of ass. Is I'm here for that stuff.
Yeah, of course you are,
know?
because you like a Western. I mean, I kept thinking about like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all those things, and how this is clearly riffing on that, which was riffing on, you know, Western tropes and all that stuff. And I was like,
and samurai movies and stuff.
Yeah,
like that
Nate's
too.
gonna eat this shit up. Whereas obviously I have less affinity for that stuff. Although I mean that was probably my favorite scene, was when he walked in that bar and then kicked a ton of ass. It's funny though, you talked about how it felt, or the finale of the first season felt a lot like an adult playing with action figures and smashing them together, or a child playing with action figures and smashing them together. My vibe when watching the first season, which I liked but didn't love, was I was like, this feels like a video game in its narrative structure. It was like this is the fetch quest episode, and then this is the like beat the boss, and then like there's very little dialogue in between. Like it's just move to the next waypoint and then do the set piece, and then like now move to the next waypoint. So that was always my feeling about Mandalorian, and then this movie just dials that feeling up to like 11. Like I just felt like I was watching a video game, and I wasn't getting. And if I got to play that video game, it might have been like kind of fun, but just like watching it happen is not super fun. Like there's that sequence in like the beginning of the movie where they're on the mountain and he destroys a bunch of AT-ATs, and then he gets on like one of the snow walkers or whatever and like falls down the cliff. And I was like, this literally looks like a video game cinematic. And then it's just like, there's so many beats where it's like another one where it was he goes back to confront the Hutts, and they've captured Rada the Hutt, and then he falls into the pit, and then he has to fight the underwater snake, which looked very cool. Like I have to say, like great design and like visual effects, incredible, all that stuff. But I was like, this feels like something out of a video game where it's like you go to confront the person, and then you get the unskippable cinematic, and then you fall, and it's like, oh, now you're in the next boss fight, and it's just like, well, so much.
To be
of this
fair,
movie,
that shit is right out of Return of the Jedi. So
no, I know, but it's just I
is
get
it Return of the Jedi or the other one?
I mean, yeah, they all kind of. But I also understand that like it's this thing of like video games were replicating movies, and now movies are replicating video games, and it's sort of like the snake is eating its own tail. But it's just like everything about this, from the sort of stilted dialogue to the like the delivery of stuff, to the CGI characters, to the overall look, to the like from go to the next waypoint, get to the next set piece, get to the next waypoint, little bit of it just felt like the whole time I was just like, I feel like I'm in a video game, but I'm not getting to play it, and that sucks. Like,
no, I hear what you're saying. I think I actually think this movie has too many action sequences.
Yeah.
And I think it's at its best when it is really focused on the world building parts of it. Mm-hmm. Like, again, seeing the Hutt world, very cool. I was for it, right? Where it's like, to me, I'm like, this is a thing that's kind of been floating around in my brain forever, of just sort of like, oh, the Hutts, like, they're this like slug species that, exists out there in Star Wars, and the idea of like, what does their home planet look like? Like, to me, that stuff is very cool, and it's more interesting to like fly into that world and see what it's like and how it works and the ecosystem and the economy and the droid army and all of that stuff than it is to necessarily like blow it all up, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's sort of similarly to like go to this like Blade Runner-y planet where like he gets to talk to Martin Scorsese as like a four-armed chimp or whatever.
Okay, so Martin Scorsese's credit comes up, and I turn to my cousin, and I'm like, "What the fuck? Like, what? Martin sorry?" Yeah. And then we kept being like, "When's he gonna show up? When's he gonna show up?" And then he did. And I was just like, "Well, I mean, sure, why not? Like, that's great. Like, what a performance."
But like that stuff, to me, it's like that stuff is the more interesting stuff, rather than like, we're going to have a giant fight with like 12 different monsters, See, it's interesting, though, that you say you thought it was cool to see like where the Hutt planet looked. For me, and again, I'm not like a crazy Star Wars person. Like and we'll get into this next season a lot more on our Star Wars episode, I think. I've always been more fascinated with the craft of Star Wars than like the narrative of Star Wars, because like at the end of the day, it's just like, it's the monomyth. But I think I'm going to contradict myself in a second, but I think Star Wars works best when it's doing world building, but isn't necessarily doing the sort of fan fiction-y stuff of like, let's explain where this thing comes from. Like, I'm less... do you think this movie was really doing that, though?
No, but I'm just saying, like, I thought the Blade Runner world, that was this whole new thing that I knew nothing about, was far more interesting and compelling to me than the Jabba the Hutt world, where it's like, let's explain where Jabba the Hutt comes from. Like, but I'm less interested in.
I don't know if I would call the Jabba the Hutt world that, right? Like, there is plenty of that shit to go around in the Star Wars, like, media these days of, like, I mean, the whole Solo movie is basically that, right? Of just like, remember that line of dialogue he said that one time? We wrote a whole scene about it. And it's exactly. Like, I don't want that
shit.
Right. But it's like, but I don't really feel like this movie seemed all that interested in explaining anything about Jabba the Hutt, of being like,
no. Again, what I was going to say is, I think what it comes down to is, for me, it's more, don't look back, look forward. Like, create new stuff for me to build my own ideas around, as opposed to go back to the well and build on that. Which, again, I'm going to contradict myself, because the two best things to come out of Star Wars in the last 20 years are Baby Yoda. I love that little guy. And every time he was on screen, I was laughing, I was having a great time, and I was just like, I love this little guy, he's the best. Even if he was doing something serious, I would just be chuckling, because like, look at him, he's so little, he's so cute. I love him so much. And then like Babu Frick shows up, and they're like, oh, we're back! And I'm like, oh, I love these little guys. But then I'm going on the record that I think the best Star Wars project post Return of the Jedi is Rogue One. I think that's the best. I think that is the best thing. And then I Andor is probably up there too, although I haven't watched all of Andor, so like that's why I can't judge it. But also Andor is a spin-off of Rogue One, so it's like, but that's what I mean.
If you haven't seen the full second season,
I know,
it's incredible.
This is what everybody tells me. I got to get on it. But like, I love Rogue One. I think that, even though like it's, again, I'm completely negating what I just said, because it is essentially like, let's directly lead into Star Wars. But there's something about that movie that feels, to me anyway, like the best of doing that stuff, where it's like, it is actually sort of drilling down into what works. And I guess also too, it's like, it's the most adult Star Wars has kind of been in the longest time. Like, it's a movie where it kills off all of its characters at the end. Like, Whereas Mandalorian Grogu does not have the guts to do anything like that. Like,
and I think like, you know, when it's at its best, those types of prequel-ish projects just use their prequel status as an alibi to do something interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference between, say, like Rogue One and Solo. Solo is literally just a series of those explanatory scenes strung together, where it's like, and then we're going to explain where his name comes from, and then we're going to explain what the Kessel Run is, and then we're going to explain where he got his fucking dice or whatever. Like,
like all that stupid shit.
It's just literally that stuff. Whereas Rogue One is like, hey, okay, so, you know, we enter Star Wars in the middle of a battle. There's a thing happening. We've never really seen what is that thing, what is the whatever it is, the Battle of Yavin or whatever, right? So, and then they just like explain something and introduce all these different characters.
Well, that's the difference, right? It's new characters leading into the story we know, as opposed to explaining the backstories of characters we've already seen for. I guess at that point when Solo comes out, it would have been, because I guess that was post Force Awakens, so it would have been, you know,
I think
3 original trilogy movies plus Han Solo dying in Force Awakens. So like, but that's the difference, is that like it's using the world to then build new things, as opposed to explaining the things we've already seen, and that's where I'm less interested.
Again, I agree that this movie is a mixed bag. I think when it's at its best, it's doing that, right? Where it's like, yes, the Hutt world, like we know who Jabba the Hutt is, but like it's not interested in like relitigating anything from existing IP. It's just being like, why don't we use that to like show a cool new world that's like no other Star Wars world we've seen before, where it's swampy but also like a city, and you know, it's got some things that maybe look like the Hutt, you know, the Jabba the Hutt lair, but like also other stuff, and there's a droid army, and just like all sorts of stuff that is riffing a little bit on things that you've seen before, but it's also something kind of new. I think that stuff's really, really cool. The stuff that that really sucks to me is like, so okay, do you know who the Mandalorian's co-pilot is?
No, I feel like I had seen him in something, but I have he looked like a video game character, because I have played a couple of the Star Wars video games over the last like decade or whatever, and I'm like, was he in that Star Wars video game I played? Like, is that what I know him from? Or like, but I was just like, again, I also haven't watched the 2nd and 3rd season of the show, so I'm like, oh, well, maybe it was a character that was introduced, and I'm just like, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I'm sure it's like, it's just some character that I'm meant to know, but I don't, because I didn't watch all 3 seasons of The Mandalorian, plus Book of Boba Fett, plus Ahsoka, plus Obi-Wan had a spin-off TV. Like, how much shit is there now? Like, it's just, I can't keep up with all this stuff.
Here's the thing that's crazy is, I have watched all that stuff. I still didn't, like, I know who this character is, but I have not watched the thing he's from.
Oh, okay.
Great. That character and the assassin with the big flat hat.
Yeah, the guy who looks like a Mortal Kombat character.
They're from, I believe they're from Star Wars Rebels and maybe the Clone Wars.
Right. The Dave Filoni
cartoon
universe. Right.
So it's like they're coming from that whole thing. So it's like, and maybe they really are just like the ideas that, kids who are teenagers now might be like, oh, that character from the cartoon I watched like when I was a kid,
Right.
But wow, it's like that just feels like such a deep cut rather than something that's like a bridging, a generation bridging, like, oh, the kids will know this, but the adults will also appreciate this. It's like, it's just kind of wild. Like that starts to get into the sort of Marvel territory of like, everything needs to be explained by the person in the seat next to you who watched more than you did. Like, I don't think that's a healthy dynamic for these movies. And they're not memorable characters enough to stand on their own. Like, that character had nothing going on in this movie.
Before the film, because I went with my cousin Scott, and and he is sort of caught up. I think he's watched everything.
Wow.
And I said, how deep do you think this is? Like, is this going to be a standalone thing, or like, am I going to be lost because I haven't watched all 3 seasons of Mandalorian? He's like, I honestly don't know. He's like, I can give you sort of a speed run of what's happened. So he sort of did that. And I said, yeah, like, it's just, I don't like the idea of Star Wars becoming like the MCU, where there's this expectation of you have absorbed everything. You know, I like, if I want serialized fiction, I'll watch television. If I watch a movie, I kind of want my movies to stand alone. Like, even Star Wars, the original trilogy, like, yes, there are elements that tie back to the previous entries, but you can watch those movies on their own, and 95% of it works. Like, they just, you get the opening crawl. I mean, that's the funny thing with Empire, is like, Star Wars ends on this upbeat thing, and then Empire dumps you in the middle, like, Deus Ex Machina, like, right in the middle of something else that has not been explained, is not tied to the original at all, and it's just like, we're on a new adventure. And, like...
Right. Sometime later, some bad stuff happened. Never mind that victory that just happened.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, the James Bond series is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
That series went off the rails when they decided, oh, all of these movies have to dovetail into each other. No, they're at their best when it's just like, this character that you know and love is going on another adventure, and you can jump in at any point and watch them in any order, and you're going to have fun. And to this movie's credit, I mean, you have to have a basic understanding of who the Mandalorian and Grogu are, which I did because but, like, I think you could watch this movie cold and not be too lost. Like, there's not
I think so too.
It's pretty self-contained, and I will give them credit for that. And I know, like, I've read some critics who think that's a negative for the movie, that it's not leaning more into the lore. But I think that was the right move.
I think so too. And again, like, this is sort of where there's a question about, like, what this movie should have been, or if it should exist at all, right? But, like, I think there's a desire when we move to the big screen to be like, well, this has to be an important moment in the story of, or in the ongoing story of these characters, right? So, like, you know, we've already had whatever 3 or 4, depending on how you count them, seasons of television about these characters, right? Or they're in the orbit of these seasons. And so, like, this movie should really be, like, moving forward their story in some important way, and all of the lore. Like, there's so much shit. There's more lore in the TV series than there is in this movie by a long shot. And this just kind of dispenses with all of that and is like, nope, we're not going to deal with any of that. We're, you know, going to build upon some, like, you know, most people probably in, let's say, North America at least, know who Jabba the Hutt is, right? Yeah. And so it's like, even if you're not a big Star Wars person, you probably kind of roughly know who Jabba the Hutt is, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, we're going to hook onto that, and we're going to do a story kind of about that. And then other than that, it's like, it's the Rebels, it's the remainder of the Empire. It's pretty easy to pick up what's going on, right? I liked that. I think that the sort of, I don't remember where the show left things in terms of, like, the relationship between the titular Mandalorian and Grogu, of, like, you know, are they, like, where are they in their relationship? Has he already kind of, like, let go and Grogu is off on his own already, and, like, they're just rehashing this or whatever? But for me, I was like, this makes sense. Like, what they're digging into makes sense for these two characters of, like, you know, Grogu is starting to find his own footing, and Mando is trying to, like, wrestle with what it means to, like, let go a little bit. To me, that was actually a fine character arc for this movie. I feel like I've seen a lot of people dunk on this movie having nothing going on with the characters and the story. I don't know if I totally agree with that. I think it was enough for me.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's what was wrong with this movie, I guess. I think it was enough to carry it, and it gets sidetracked within other things that kind of bothered me.
One of the criticisms I've seen, and I do kind of agree with, is that, you know, when your expectation from a movie is that your characters are going to develop and evolve and be changed by the end of the story. And that in the way that this story is sort of constructed, it kind of just resets things at the end back to pretty much where they were at the beginning, so that they can just sort of, in a sense, if you're watching the TV series and then you watch the movie and then you start season 4, it works. But if you don't watch the movie, you can start season 4 and lift the movie out, and it doesn't really impact the story all that much because nothing has really happened or changed that affects the overall arc of the characters. And I think that's kind of a valid criticism. It's like, okay, so at the beginning of the movie, you know, he's saying, Grogu, don't touch the buttons. And then at the end of the movie, he's like, come up here, you can touch the button. But like on the whole, like he didn't die. Yeah. He's like, he doesn't. And so I think that's kind of a valid criticism in that. But what it got me thinking about is like, it is this sort of challenging thing with when TV shows make the jump to cinema. It's interesting because we're covering this season. We're going to be talking about the X-Files movie and sort of the challenge of how do you up the ante, but also still make it so that people who come in cold understand what's going on, but then people who are watching the show who maybe didn't see the movie can then watch the show and not be lost because the events of the movie don't impact the overall arc too much. I mean, the Simpsons
and the X-Files has done it both ways. That's the interesting thing.
That is the interesting thing.
Like, this would be the temptation is to do what the first X-Files movie does, which we'll get into it, but it's like, it's very plotty, right? And I think I would push back on that criticism in the sense that, like, I think that just because the change that happens in this movie is completely internal to the characters does not mean that nothing happens. And it is not a plot critical movie, like in that, as you say, if you just watched one season and then you watch this movie, or you don't watch this movie and then you go and watch the next season, you're not going to have missed anything plot wise. Mm-hmm. But there is like an interesting sort of development of the characters. It's totally straightforward. Like not to say that it's like complex and weighty, but like, you know, the moment where you know, there's a whole chunk in the middle where we're really following Grogu as he's trying to like save.
It's the best part of the whole movie because it's all about my little boy Grogu.
And again, it's like that's a part that is completely silent, right? Mm-hmm. Or at least without dialogue, I should say. With in fact, with an incredible score in this movie.
Yeah, I mean the score really is
outstanding score.
I mean that is the best. Grogu and Ludwig Göransson's score are the two best things about this movie, and I would argue are worth the price of admission.
I agree. I think this movie looks and sounds great, personally. But that scene, again, when this movie's at its best, it's not doing fighting, it's not doing dialogue. You're watching Grogu just navigate this environment and try to figure out how he's going to save his father figure, right? And then there's a moment at the end of that where Grogu finally does it, and he wakes up, and Mando's not where he's been lying, and he goes outside, and he sees Mando, like, you know, walking through the forest or whatever, and he says something like, you know, the old care for the young, and then the young care for the old. This is the way. Mm-hmm. That's great. That is some good, the bad, and the ugly shit.
Oh,
of
absolutely.
Being like, this is silent for a really long time, and then there's going to be one piece of dialogue, and it's a good piece of dialogue, right? And they don't always pull that off in this movie. There's plenty of bad dialogue.
Yeah, I just wish the movie was more of that. Like, I wish it had the balls to like just shut up and stop whacking CGI monster goo and just tell an intimate story about what it's like to be a parent and and like to be fearful of what is going to happen to your kid. Like there is that great line where the Hutts say like, you will die and we will live for a lot longer. And, you know, Grogu's going to be on his own and we look forward to torturing him when you're gone. Like, that was... And again, they also kind of set it up early on when he gets drugged and then they throw him in the pit. But... And Grogu's captured. But there was that part of me that was like, oh, are they taking him off the board this early? And, like, the rest of the movie is going to be this sort of like, how do they come back together? And it's like, no. We wouldn't dare do that because it's called Mandalorian and Grogu. People paid to see these two together. And it's like, I wish they had the guts to actually like try and do something a little bit ballsy and different. And I mean, I guess it would be challenging to sustain a 2-hour movie with a character who can't speak, but I don't know, but like again, it would be interesting.
And I think, to me, it just goes to this idea of, like, the way that you interact with the world doesn't always have to be fighting things.
Well, that's the video game-ness of it, right? Like,
And that is the video game-ness of it, or the action figure-ness of it.
Totally, and
like,
that's the big... It's such a criticism of video games, of like, so many video games, the primary function of interactivity is violence. It's either you shooting with a gun, or you're hitting with a sword, or you're like, you can't just have... And when there are games that sort of challenge that notion and are, like Firewatch, or a game I love... they get classified as walking simulators. It's like, well, if you're not punching or fighting someone, you're just walking around. And it's like, well, no, like, it's interesting because I'm working on this documentary about Sierra Online, and that's a whole thing that we don't have to get into on our show. But like the adventure game genre of the 80s and 90s, early 90s, like they were primarily about walking around and solving puzzles, and that was enough. Right? Like, yes, sometimes if it was a Sierra game, frequently you would die, but it wasn't, combat was not the main form of interactivity. And video games have sort of gone in that direction of like, that is the main way we interact, is we create violence. And so, yes, like, that's maybe partly why this movie feels so much like a video game, because it's like, it seems that's the only way it's interested in engaging or creating a set piece, is that set piece has to be about beating the crap out of a CGI monster.
Right, for sure. And I think...
Like, there's not even a chase in this movie. Like, think about Star Wars and how many great chase scenes there are.
The alternative isn't just dialogue. Because, again, I'm coming back to it again and again, but The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is a great example of, like, which, again, we're going to talk about this season, because it's the 60th anniversary, I think, of that movie.
Something like that, yeah.
But that movie does such a good... Like, there is violence, obviously, in that movie, but it's like, it is the climax of a scene. It's not the whole scene, right? Yeah. And a lot of other stuff is happening that is just about visual interest. This movie does that sometimes, but not enough. And I think it could actually sustain a whole movie just with that, and the world building, the small character moments that are maybe more about visuals than dialogue. Like, there's so much that could be done. And I think there's a lot of potential there that it just doesn't totally live up to. But here's the thing. I think a lot of the flack this movie's getting is because people want it to be like, quote unquote, a Star Wars movie, right? Whatever that is meant to be. I am excited about the prospect of it trying to be something different that isn't dialogue heavy, that isn't about huge amounts of lore, that is about exploring worlds, is about puppetry, is about... there's stop motion in this movie. Yeah. I don't know if you noticed that, but like
Phil Tippett
the whole
did a bunch of
droid
stuff.
thing at the end is Phil Tippett doing his stop motion thing. That stuff is very cool to me, and I love that part of it. But I agree, it doesn't totally have the balls to go 100% in that direction, and that's where it fails.
And to me,
it should be going even harder in that direction.
To me, that's the Disneyification of Star Wars in like... Yeah. Not to say that when Star Wars was solely owned by Lucasfilm, it didn't have its issues, but it's like the prequel trilogy exists.
Have their own problems.
But it just like, you can see the corporate synergy at play here, and being like, well, you can't kill any of these characters, because then we won't be able to make more TV shows and sell more toys and action figures, and like, you got to have a bunch of monsters because we got to be able to sell those action figures, and like, which again, I know that was definitely a thing with the original Star Wars, but it just like, this movie to me, of all the Star Wars stuff I have consumed, and admittedly I have not consumed it all, but of the stuff I've consumed, this was the one that reeked the most of corporate interference and sort of like what feels like corporate mandates to be like, you got to do this, you got to make sure there's this, you got to do this, and by the end of it, you got to make sure that we can get back to where we were so that we can keep doing this and making more TV shows and more money.
I don't agree with that. I think, to me, like, again, Solo is a way bigger offender for me of that stuff.
No question.
Where it's just like, I think there are worse examples of it that are even more cynical. I think maybe the thing that people are underestimating is that Jon Favreau may be really earnestly invested in this stuff.
Right.
Like, I've seen interviews with him where he talks about sort of his process or what he loves about Star Wars and stuff. This guy loves classic cars. He loves action figures, right? He's talked about, like, the way I started thinking about stories was playing with my action figures.
Right.
Like, I think that to me, I think the way he approaches this movie may actually come from a very earnest Jon Favreau sort of place, rather than it being like a movie by committee. I think this is like kind of his vision. It just isn't what a lot of people want.
Well, and to be fair, he's also the guy who kind of kickstarts the MCU. Like, he directs the first Iron Man. And we know, I think I'm on the record on this show of not being a fan of the MCU. So it's like, maybe this is just like, again, it's going in a direction that is not to my tastes. And
totally.
that it's just like, and that's fine. Like, I'm not a huge Star Wars guy. I love the original trilogy. And I love Rogue One, and I love bits and pieces of it. But, and as I said, we'll get into this later this year when we discuss the movie. But, like, I know that the thing that has drawn me or been attractive to me about Star Wars has never been the narrative and the characters. To me, it's about the filmmaking craft. Like, I was obsessed with how they made Star Wars. Like, that was incredible to me. And watching this, there was no part of me that was like, damn, like, how'd they do that? I was just like, well...
See, that's crazy to me, because I think this movie looks... I think this movie looks great. I would say in IMAX, there was a lot of stuff where you're like, oh, they clearly built some of this stuff, right? And they actually, like, did it. Like, again, the puppetry for Grogu, he's, like, walking around a lot in this movie. They're not doing the waist down or the waist up thing. Like, he is a fully realized creature.
Dude, let me tell you, anytime Grogu is on screen, it's the Homer line. Whenever Grogu's not on screen, people should be asking, "Where's Grogu?" And I was,
and they are. Like, they're asking.
But yeah, because like it is. I love that little puppet so goddamn much. Yeah, and same with the Babu Fricks. Like, they're so cute, and like you can tell that they're physical, like puppeteered.
Yeah. But it's so. I think it's so seamless that we're maybe not even appreciating how good the animatronics and puppetry is in this, because it is like. You just don't even think about it. They're just moving around on screen like little characters, but they are really there. Dude, they're actually there.
I rewatched Empire Strikes Back in January.
Sure.
And again, let me be clear. I would kill for Grogu. I love that little guy. I still think you watch the Grogu performances and then you go back and watch Frank Oz doing Yoda in Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
It's a night and day. That is again, living creature on that set.
But I think like part of that is that Yoda is a fully realized character, not a baby, right? Like
maybe
at the end of the day, Grogu does not have any dialogue, does not have has a very sort of simplistic emotional life, right? Of like, I love my dad. I want to eat things.
It's funny.
Whereas, Yoda is this like wizened Jedi master who's maybe a little bit crazy, and like it's a great character.
There's a nice sort of parallel between the two, and one of my favorite moments in this is when in that sort of opening set piece when he's blowing up all the AT-ATs and like taking out the bad guys, and he's trying to blow up the bad guy's spaceship or whatever, and. Grogu notices that there's a bunch of bombs that have already been set on the ship, and he just starts like hammering on Mandalorian's helmet. And then I was thinking back to when Yoda is beating R2-D2 with this stick, and it's just like, and I love it, and it's so good, and it's just there's something funny about a little puppet wailing on a big metal thing that will never not be funny to me.
Yeah,
so,
but I think even the
more
sets
of that.
In this movie,
it needs more of that.
Yeah, but like the sets in this movie, at least the immediate area around the actors seem to be practical. I'm sure there's some volume stuff that's extending it, but it's not like you don't get that floaty feeling in most scenes of this movie where it's just like, oh, they're just kind of walking around the volume. It's like you do get a sense that they're in buildings. The buildings have a lot of like nice detail, like. If you look carefully in the Rebel base or whatever, the Republic base, New Republic base that they're in, it's like above the bar, there's a bunch of like helmets and robot heads from like stormtroopers and stuff. There's just like lots of fun, like production design details in this that I think are it reminds me of the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, that's fair. And like, I liked Force Awakens, and I didn't mind The Last Jedi. Like, I'm not hot or cold on it. Like, it seems like you have to pick a side for that movie, and I'm like, I enjoyed it. Like, that's my take on it. I enjoyed it. Like, I'm not gonna fight to the death either way for whether or not it should be retconned out of history or is the greatest Star
Or it's the
Wars
future
movie.
of Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't feel one way or the other. I like that Yoda came back, right? Like, and then I think Rise of Skywalker, is that the last one? Is that what it's
I think
called?
that's right. Yeah.
Somehow Palpatine returned. Like, okay, great. That's what we got. So yeah, like that's I don't know. Because we've been talking a lot and we should wrap this up, but before we do, I do think the one thing we kind of haven't touched on is the performances. Like, we talked a little bit about Grogu's performance, but like, what was your take on Pedro Pascal? And like, okay, I just have to say, about 30 minutes into the movie, my cousin turns to me and goes, "When do we think Jeremy Allen White's going to show up?" And I was like, I don't know. And then he's like, is he the voice of Rada? And I was like, well, if he is, that feels kind of wasted. Like, did they just pitch, like, why would you hire him and then like pitch his voice down to the point where you can't even tell it? Like, that to me,
he looks the part, so
yeah, I mean, I've watched a couple seasons of The Bear. Rada wasn't wearing like a really tight white t-shirt, but yeah, that performance is weird to me. And it's interesting too, I guess, because it's like the whole thing about Mando is like, I also was wondering this and just I didn't nudge it and say it to my cousin, but I wanted to be like, how much of this do you think is actually Pedro Pascal walking around, and how much, like, did he just show up for that one day when he had to have his helmet off, and is the rest ADR?
They do credit his his stunt performers, stand-in / stunt people in this movie, as they should.
Yes, which is cool, but that just
and that's
also
the benefit
sort
of having a character with a helmet, is you can have them do all sorts of crazy shit. This is like, the Power Rangers trick.
Yeah, or the
right?
I mean, V for Vendetta, although allegedly like all of that is Hugo Weaving, but it did make me sort of go like, there's something about it though that the whole movie I'm just sort of like, I don't think that's really Pedro Pascal in there. Like, it kind of feels like he's phoning in his performance a little bit, like outside of the one scene where it clearly is him. And I really like him as a performer. Like, I've grown to, I first discovered him through this, and then saw him in The Last of Us, and then I've sort of caught him in the various other things he's done in the last 5 years or whatever, and I think he's like really good. So it's just weird that like so much, basically the three main performances in this movie are either voice performances or a character that is a puppet and doesn't really speak, and like Sigourney Weaver is basically the one human that we get to interact the whole movie.
She's just existing. I mean,
she's kind
of
she's like, well, I guess I'll take this paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, I think this is, if I'm going to make one final comparison to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, one of the benefits of that movie has is faces, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like so much in that movie is done just with a shot of a face reacting,
close
and no
up on
dialogue.
the eyes. Yeah,
close up on the eyes, or a mouth twitch, or whatever, like a reaction shot. And it's really hard to accomplish that with both arms tied behind your back, with your face tied behind your back.
Yeah.
So I do think that this movie suffers from that, because like, if you just had a bunch of shots of Pedro Pascal's face when he's actually on set reacting to real things, and it's just, he's not saying anything, he's just responding with an emotion on his face, that's very powerful. Like, movies are built on that shit, and this movie does not have a lot of that because of what you're pointing out, and it makes it harder to live without dialogue, right?
Well,
when you don't have that unspoken communication.
Yeah, I mean, we went to an arts high school and we studied commedia dell'arte, and we learned all about mask work and how when the eyes are the window to the soul, and when you don't have that, how you have to adapt your performance to emote without your face. And it's interesting, I think of like some of my favorite superhero characters, it's like, well, Batman has eyes, but you know, in a movie context, like it's behind rubber, so it's kind of complicated. But you know, you think of Batman the animated series and how much is emoted just through like how those white slits move and stuff. Yep. And then now in the more sort of recent Marvel verse, like Spider-Man has eyes that can emote, and like Deadpool has the eyes that can emote, and like they realized we need to be able to do something there.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do the thing that I always do, which is tie it back to Phantom of the Opera, which is famously when that musical first started, like the original logo is a mask that, you know, is just basically cuts out the mouth. And when they were sort of early in rehearsals, the director realized, he's like, I'm not going to be able to have a character emote if 90% of their face is covered up. We have to create a half mask to at least split half the face so they can emote with half of their face. Right. And to your point, when you have... I will give the performers credit that, like, I think the Mandalorian is actually able to emote despite having his face covered.
Sure.
And I'm surprised by how much I am actually able to read from that performance at times. But it is 100% hampering their ability to emote by the fact that he's constantly wearing the helmet. And then when the helmet comes off, he's kind of like, it seems like he's not really emoting. Like I was sort of like, oh, this is not
Agreed.
What I was
We don't
expecting.
even get a close up, I don't think, really.
Yeah.
It's sort of a medium shot, right? Yeah, I mean, I think, like, you know, coming back to Commedia dell'arte, like one of the tricks, right, with mask work is that in the absence of being able to use the muscles on your face to emote, the angles of the mask become critical.
Huge.
How the shadow is hitting the mask and how that changes the way it appears and stuff like that. And again, like, the Mandalorian's outfit looks really cool, but that mask has no nooks and crannies to catch shadows, right?
No.
It's like, it's so flat from an emotive standpoint, which looks cool, but it does make it hard, you know? I agree that, like, the body language is doing a lot of work, but it's tough.
And again, if you think about it, when it's coming from the Boba Fett design of, like, he's meant to be like this serious bounty hunter killer, like he's meant to be emotionless, then that's a great design. But then you're sort of, when you now have to create a character who has to emote, you've sort of like hampered yourself, and you've created this lore. Well, he can't take off the mask because like that's a no and all this stuff. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it's a bummer to have these like really, really great performers just kind of not getting the chance to do their thing. And again, like, I don't know, maybe Jeremy Allen White like mo-capped that performance. I don't
have no idea.
But like,
if he did, it doesn't make a difference.
I literally spent 90% of the movie being like, that must just be like some voiceover actor that they had. And then he gave there were a couple lines that he gave where I was like, oh, that must be him, because like I'm hearing the sort of like inflection in his voice that I know from other work that he's done.
I mean, okay, so here's just a proposed fix here. What if his co-pilot was not like a purple ape from the Star Wars cartoons, and instead was a human being who could be like the buddy in the co-pilot seat that can emote with his face and be a foil to Mando? I mean, I guess that maybe that could take away a little bit from the Mando and Grogu relationship by having like that third wheel, but would that help to humanize, I guess, what's going on?
I don't know, maybe, but also like, you know, again, having just watched Star Wars the other night, like my favorite character, or at least the character I see the most of myself in, is C-3PO, and like,
sure,
he can't emote. He don't, like, his face doesn't move at all, and yet like Anthony Daniels imbues such character to that droid. Like, I think it's possible. It's just like it requires better writing and a more dialed in performance. And like, again, I'm not trying to disparage Pascal and his doubles and stand-ins or whatever you want to refer to them. Like, I do think that they're doing a decent job, but it's just like, I don't think they've been given enough meat to chew on to even bother.
And again, like, okay, I said this was my last Good, the Bad, and the Ugly comparison, but I feel like it's asking for it. Again, if you compare those movies, like, and Mando is the man with no name, very much.
Absolutely. I mean, it's
in that vein.
It's clearly designed that is
Right.
that is what they're riffing on.
But like, and Clint Eastwood does not give a wide emotive range in those movies. Right?
No, he certainly does not.
And I think people like to dunk on him for that. But it's like it's the writing is sharp in those movies in such a way that he comes off as a little bit philosophical, right?
Yeah.
And even though at the same time he's giving a kind of deadpan performance, you almost need that kind of sharpness in the writing for Mando to kind of like really work. And again, that one scene I pointed out, I think it hits it, but then the rest of the movie doesn't really have that. It's just him walking in and being like, who do you work for? or whatever. Some variation on that of like, trying to bribe someone or whatever. And it's very functional dialogue. He's not observing anything about the world or commenting on things or whatever, having some kind of emotional response. So like, I think you can get away with not having a face, not having like broad emotions, I should say. But you can't get away with doing nothing, right? Like you have to have something to lean on character-wise to kind of really make it pop. And I do think it's maybe missing that a little bit. He's mostly, again, when I like this movie, he's mostly a vehicle for experiencing the world, right? Or he's the foil to Grogu.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
so like when it's in that zone, it's kind of working. And then when he's asked to carry it, it's not totally working.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, and it makes me all the more excited that we're going to get to discuss Star Wars in depth later this year, because I think we'll have... not that there's... I think everything that has to be said about Star Wars has already been said, but it will just be fun to unpack that movie together, and...
in the context of The Simpsons.
Yeah, stay tuned for that, and
we'll see you around the Plex.
we'll see you around the Plex in a couple months. We'll be back. Thanks for listening.
Shh.